Good evening, I'm Diane in Hong Kong and you're watching ViuTV News. Coming up on tonight's show. Hong Kong on alert ahead of President Xi Jinping's arrival for handover celebrations. Dozens protest outside Beijing's liaison office calling for the release of Liu Xiaobo after he was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And ties between Washington and Beijing have improved, but a White House plan to list China as one of the worst human rights offenders could change all of that. Now, Hong Kong is on alert ahead of President Xi Jinping's arrival for handover celebrations. Authorities say Xi faces a, quote, rather high terror threat during his three-day visit. There's no specific intelligence indicating the president is a target, but officials aren't taking any chances. Heavy security measures are already in place around Wan Chai, where the president will be staying. Police were seen patrolling the area and inspecting the drains. And there were close inspections on the rooftop of the Hong Kong Convention and Exhibition Centre, where most of the celebrations will take place. Sources say security zones will be set around locations Xi is visiting, and people won't be able to enter or leave the areas 30 minutes before Xi arrives or leaves any venue.
In view of the recent heightened threat of terrorist attack, it is necessary to set up bigger security zones around the venues where the president attends to ensure his safety, in particular in the area of Wan Chai North, and that will necessitate more road closure and diversions when compared to previous similar security operations.
Now, well ahead of Xi's arrival, protests are already gathering pace. Dozens called on the central government to release Nobel Peace Laureate Liu Xiaobo following news he was diagnosed with late-stage liver cancer. Some wore masks depicting Liu as they marched this morning from Western Police Station to Beijing's liaison office. Among them were Demosisto General Secretary Joshua Wong as well as lawmaker Leung Kwok-kong. They criticized the central government for suppressing free speech and for persecuting Liu. The 61-year-old was jailed in 2009 for inciting subversion of state power. Liaoning Province's Prison Bureau confirmed Liu had been granted medical parole.
The winners of the Nobel Peace Award should openly demanding the freedom of Mr. Liu Xiaobo, including Aung San Suu Kyi. Those who have suffered from dictatorship should immediately in support of Mr. Liu Xiaobo.
Now, meantime, more details on Liu's health condition. A family friend says his cancer has spread and the treatment he's received is little help. Speaking over the phone to Hong Kong media, Ye Du, who is a confidant of Liu Xiaobo's wife, Liu Xia, said he is in a serious condition. Chinese authorities say 8 well-known tumor experts are taking care of him at a hospital in Shenyang. The local broadcaster Now TV said it couldn't find his name on any patient list there. Sources say Liu Xia has arrived in the city for a week to accompany her husband. A heart-wrenching video of her has surfaced online.
Liu Xiaobo can't receive surgery. He can't undergo radiotherapy or chemotherapy treatments.
Now, sources say the White House plans to list China among the world's worst offenders in human trafficking and forced labor. As Grace Lee reports, it could jeopardize recent easing tensions between the two countries under the Trump administration.
Another blow to the Washington-Beijing relationship could be right around the corner. Sources telling Reuters that the U.S. plans to place China on its list of worst offenders for human trafficking and forced labor around the world, putting it on par with the likes of Iran, Syria, and North Korea. The Tier 3 rating is reserved for countries that fail to meet a minimum standard set by the U.S. without making any effort to improve. The decision would come from Secretary of State Rex Tillerson and is expected to be announced later on Tuesday. It's not clear yet why the U.S. would choose to downgrade China, which is currently on Washington's Tier 2 watch list, although last year's report criticized Beijing for not doing enough to curb state-sponsored forced labor. Donald Trump has also shown signs that his patience is wearing thin when it comes to China's role in the North Korea situation, as Beijing takes only modest steps towards pressuring Pyongyang over its nuclear program. Strictly speaking, any country with a Tier 3 rating could be hit with sanctions from Washington, limiting access to U.S. and international aid.
Now, staying stateside, where the U.S. Supreme Court handed a victory to President Donald Trump. That's after it greenlighted parts of a controversial travel ban on people from 6 Muslim-majority countries. The president called it a win for national security, but critics are decrying the decision. It was a unanimous decision. All 9 Supreme Court justices agreed parts of Donald Trump's executive order had grounds to go ahead. It means those without family or business ties to the U.S. could be barred from entering the country. In a statement, the president called the decision, quote, a clear victory for our national security. But outside the White House, worries abound. At Dulles International Airport outside Washington, D.C., some felt the ban negatively targeted Muslims.
As a practicing Muslim American, I can tell you that ISIS does not represent Islam. And so seeing this travel ban and seeing how some people are, advocating for this ban, it's concerning for me.
The U.S. has always been a role model and a leader that other nations look up to in terms of their acceptance of people and the support that the U.S. provides to people in need. So I think this travel ban really is a symbol for quite the opposite.
Trump's March 6th order called for a blanket 90-day ban on people from Iran, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, Syria and Yemen. It would also impose a 120-day ban on all refugees while the government implements stronger vetting procedures. Federal courts earlier ruled the order violated federal immigration law and was discriminatory towards Muslims. But the top court's Monday decision narrowed the scope of these lower court rulings, and it allowed a limited version of the refugee ban to go into effect. But it's not final yet. While the ban applies for now, the court will hear arguments in October to make a final decision on whether the policy is lawful. It'll be a major test of presidential powers. Meantime, experts are worried this will confuse U.S. consular officials overseas and could bring about more court cases over what constitutes a bona fide connection to the U.S. More on the U.S. and the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office warns as many as 22 million Americans would lose their health insurance under the proposed Senate bill to replace Obamacare. In an assessment likely to complicate the bill's passing even further, the CBO estimates that by 2026, there would be 49 million people in the U.S. without health cover. That's compared to the current 28 million. It demonstrates an uphill battle faced by Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell to weigh up the concerns of moderate Republicans against their more conservative colleagues. On the upside, CBO projects the health legislation would help cut the budget deficit by $321 billion within the next 9 years.
I'd like to thank my colleagues for joining me here today to discuss this jaw-dropping report from the Congressional Budget Office. Today's report confirms what doctors, patient advocates, Democrats, and Republicans have been saying for weeks. Trump care will lead to higher costs for less care and will lead to tens of millions of Americans left without any insurance.
Now, news on the other side of the Atlantic next. While uncertainty continues to cloud ongoing Brexit negotiations, British Prime Minister Theresa May said she wants EU citizens currently living in the UK to stay after the official divorce in 2019. In Parliament, she said all EU citizens who have been residing in the country for at least 5 years before a cut-off date will be able to apply for permanent residence, but will be subject to reciprocal agreement for Britons living in the EU. May says she's received a very positive response from leaders of other EU states over the plan.
I know there's been some anxiety about what would happen to EU citizens at the point we leave the European Union. Today, I want to put that anxiety to rest. I want to completely reassure people that under these plans, no EU citizen currently in the UK lawfully will be asked to leave at the point the UK leaves the EU. We want you to stay.
All right, coming up next, the latest from the world of business with Joel Flynn.
Thanks, Diane. OK, let's kick things off with the business segment by taking a quick look at what's been happening on Hong Kong markets today. The Hang Seng index of leading shares was down 0.12% at the close, finishing at 25,839.99 points. Smaller shares seeing more of those losses, though. One particular sore point was Major Holdings, which shed almost 81% of its value. The company said at the end of last week it expected to report a full-year loss. Well, it's even surprised some analysts. Data compiled by EY over the last 6 months showed mainland China overtook Hong Kong as the largest IPO market in the world. The number of companies listing their shares for the first time on the mainland was up 303% compared to last year, and they raised 336% more money. IPOs from 246 companies in Shanghai and Shenzhen raised $18 billion in total, making those places the second and third largest markets. New York currently holds top spot. Hong Kong, which was the top market in 2016, raised $6.9 billion from 69 company listings. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi just finished a flying visit to the US. It was a closely watched one by environmentalists and economists alike. Dining with Donald Trump at the White House, the pair have big differences over trade, immigration, and the Paris Climate Accord. That didn't seem to stop them, though, rather, from getting on with this hug in the Rose Garden, just one of a number during the trip. Trump reportedly pressed Modi to relax trade tariffs on US goods. The country's trade deficit with India is more than $30 billion. India is also reportedly the second largest customer of US arms sales as well, purchasing $15 billion of equipment since 2008.
We have had tremendous meetings today, tremendous success, and we enjoy a wonderful relationship, but it's never been better than it is today. And again, anytime you'd like, we want to have you back as soon as possible. Thank you very much for being here.
Now, when it comes to managing companies, usually it's the CEO or chairman that will be making the big decisions. That is, unless you have activist shareholders like hedge fund Third Point. It's just bought up a $3.5 billion stake in food giant Nestle